And you're welcome. Thank you for being here this evening, the 13th of March, 2025. And it's a very special and perhaps long overdue webinar this evening. We've got Home Sweet Home or humidity, mold growth, ventilation, or thermal comfort issues. And for many people, I think we probably had you at mold, which is an issue and a surprise for some people when they move to Portugal, and something we're going to learn about this evening. I'd like, if I may, to just cover some of the points from the listing on the Expats Portugal website for this event, because it's really good to remind ourselves what we're going to be talking about this evening. It's a very important webinar, and we've got a great guest for you. I'm looking at this over at expatsportugal.com. The latent, it's a key word, latent conditions in your Portuguese house and how to correct them the right way. And that's what Nuno Fernandes will be telling us about this evening. Thinking of buying or renting a home in Portugal, or are you already living here and struggling with unexpected damp, mold, or discomfort in your home? And that's very possible because it's been very wet recently. But this is quite a normal thing to face here in Portugal in any given year. Many people assume they will enjoy warm winters and cool summers, hopefully, only to find themselves battling cold, humid interiors, higher than expected energy bills, oh yes, and poor air quality. Homes in Portugal are built differently from what you may be used to, and understanding these differences is crucial before you buy, sign a long-term rental, or try to improve your current home. So we'll be talking to Nuno tonight about the history of Portuguese homes and how traditional building methods still influence modern construction, how cultural norms shape comfort expectations, and why that can be very different from what you're used to. And I think people from the UK and US certainly find this. Common structural issues, including problems with walls, roofs, and insulation that can affect durability and efficiency. Indoor air quality concerns, such as the aforementioned mold, humidity, and poor ventilation, and how they impact health and well-being, of course. And at the end of this, there'll be a Q&A session for the premium members here. So we'll, when we finish the recording, we'll have a chance to hang out with Nuno and ask questions directly. And in the meantime, I'll take your, I'm sure, many questions in the chat and put them to Nuno as this webinar unfolds this evening. So without further ado, thank you very much, Nuno Fernandes of Energon. Thank you for being here. Lovely to meet you. Lovely to see you.
Hi, everyone. Good night. I'm happy to be here. Thank you for the opportunity to come and explain a little bit about these issues that are, quite annoying to everyone.
Yes.
So the title of the webinar, the Home Sweet Home ? It's supposed to be quite like that because people come to a new country. And I start by saying who I am. My name is Nuno. I've been working for 30 years in the industry of project and construction in pretty much 3 continents, including the United States, Australia, Middle East, and a few other countries in Europe, all over Europe.
Wow. So you've had a chance to compare and contrast a few cultures.
Yes, and one important point to understand this, first and foremost, is to give a bit of context about the construction in Portugal and how this compares to wherever people come from and their expectations. So Portuguese construction and Portugal itself, if you're already living here, it's a small country. However, there's a lot of differences between construction. And when I say construction, I say vernacular or traditional construction. And that has to do with the weather, because the weather really is different from different parts in Portugal. Another thing that impacts on construction is the abundance of materials in the specific parts of the country where those houses are built. So you'll see, for instance, that up in the north, or the very north of Portugal, towards the coast, the houses have big windows, whereas if you go to lower Alentejo, the houses are lower and they have small windows, and that's to protect from the elements, the heat in the Alentejo, and bringing more sun in where you are in the north. Or if you are in the Algarve, traditional housing didn't have roof. It was a terrace up there that people used to dry fruits and other things, because the rain was also less abundant in the Algarve. Now, you still can find these houses, and you can still buy houses built exactly like this in Portugal. But most likely than not, you're going to buy a house that has been built, I don't know, in the 60s, in the 70s, in the 80s, somewhere around there. What happens when we buy a house, it's an emotional decision most of the times. And we see a place, we love it, and we overlook a lot of the pre-existing conditions of the house, of latent problems that the house may have, because we have decided that is going to be our, dream home, our home sweet home. Um, and sometimes we forget about these kind of issues, or the vendor may, mask those issues. So it's only when you're living there that you realize that the problems exist. Now, why so many people have problems in the houses in Portugal? It's a question, and the abundant problems and the recurrent problems that you have in your house. Why does that happen? Um, so in the old days, the traditional buildings, they were made for purpose. People would not be building because, oh, it's just so pretty to build a house like this. It would be to fence off the elements like I said before, in different parts of the country. Now, Portugal, you need to understand this because it's going to be a good explanation. For 40 years, we lived under a dictatorship until 1974. And that dictatorship pretty much dictated, amongst other stuff, that we would be closed off from the other countries. So we were pretty much self-sufficient, whatever that means. Um, it meant for the Portuguese here that we didn't have access to a lot of the stuff that was happening outside of the country. And also that things like electricity, the price of electricity compared to whatever your earnings were, it was a very different and very difficult to get there, and therefore finding solutions like heating for the houses or air conditioning or anything like that, it was all seen as a luxury. Not only you didn't have access to the technology, but also if you did, then the bills would be prohibitive to pay. So in a way, due to our climate, which yes can be quite annoying at times, but people think, oh, you have 300 days of the year of sunshine and it's all fine. It's not all fine, and a lot of people realize that only when they hear.
Mm.
Now, culturally, this level of comfort, if you come from the US, for instance, or if you come from the UK, maybe you're used to central heating in your house since you were a little kid. However, that did not happen in Portugal. Not only because, although annoying temperatures and annoying weather can be here, it's not lethal like if you were exposed in a Scandinavian country or in an Eastern European country. So somehow culturally people, endure this kind of discomfort by putting another piece of clothing on or another blanket on the bed, and everything is fine because then spring comes out and everything is forgotten. And then it comes back in winter. So this is a bit of a cultural behavior that we have in Portugal that you won't see in other countries. The second thing about the construction in Portugal that has these, like I said, recurrent issues is that a lot of people in Portugal that didn't have a good life, and we're talking about hundreds of thousands of people during the 60s and 70s, they immigrated to other countries, namely France and Germany, Luxembourg, Switzerland. Then others went somewhere else, but the bulk went to these countries. And the highlight of your life as an immigrant was to come back to Portugal with money and build your dream house with bits and bobs of the ideas that you saw in other countries, and you started building in a way that you thought it was okay. In any case, you'd only come here in the summer, so those houses were closed off all year long until summer. And we're talking about hundreds of thousands of houses everywhere in the country.
Mhm.
Little by little, those technologies or those techniques of building, they went on to be the standard in Portugal. And construction, I don't know if you ever thought about it, but construction is one of those industries that has had very little evolution for centuries. Yes, you can invent bricks instead of, stones. But if you think about it, it's still the same thing. People put things together with cement, walls together, then they invent another material for the roof, but it's still a roof. Nothing really changes. It's done with men, it's done with a crane. Nothing really changes there. So people get used to build this way, and then this drags on and drags on until today. And today you have the access to all the different materials. You have the access to all kinds of information online and offline, all of that kind of stuff. And I see even today, I saw a new development coming up, and I'm like, how is it possible that these guys continue to build in such a way? Because it's wrong. They know it's wrong, but it's like, I've always done it this way, so why bother? So in Portugal, generally speaking, we build solid. It's not like the buildings, generally speaking, also in America, where you have a wooden frame, or even in Australia, you have a wooden frame house and you build on this wooden frame. Here you do foundations in concrete, you do beams, and you do slabs in concrete, and you build the walls in terracotta tiles, and your roof is terracotta also. And all this seems like great, and it is in a way, but also it is not in another way, because all this material is a humongous thermal mass that in some situations it's good, but in the majority of the situations it's not, especially if you have very wet winter or continued high temperature summer. After a week of hot days, all this material will radiate the heat to the inside at night when you want to have some relief from the heat. So it doesn't work. There are ways to build today that are correct. There are ways to build and materials to use that will overcome all these problems, but it's not done quick enough. And as I started to say, um, you buy a house mainly on emotional reasons. Of course, it's going to be within your budget. Of course, it's going to be where you want to live, but ultimately, it's an emotional decision. And that emotional decision sometimes clouds our judgment in terms of, what are we buying? What are the problems here that needs to be solved? And we're talking about underlying problems, but it may be even if you decide to build a new house. Are you building it in the way that you should? Are you taking into consideration the geographic place where you are? Because it's different to be in São Martinho do Porto or being in, I don't know, Beja, for instance, in the lower Alentejo. It's completely different. The climate is different. The humidity levels are different. The winters are different and the summers are different. So there's not a silver bullet valid for
Yeah,
every
or a
situation.
universal solution, right? Yeah.
Correct, and for every
Mm.
house. So having said that, the climate, the perception that the climate in Portugal is this mild climate, fantastic, that is always going to be, you know, very good to be outside. Yes, the skies are going to be blue, but it's going to be cold and it's going to
Mm.
be wet. And in the summer, maybe it's not 25 degrees, maybe 30 or 32 or 35, depends on where you live. So this is all of a big importance. So when you find that sometimes you call someone to your house and say, "Oh, it's have this problem," and they're going to tell you, "Ah, yeah, this is because your windows are not up to scratch because they're not good enough." And the guy comes and he changes the windows, uh, and that resolves the problem only partially. And this is also a typical thing that happens in Portugal. You try to remediate something, you try to fix a little bit here and a little bit there, forgetting that there is an underlying issue. It's like having a headache. You take a pill, next morning you have another headache, and you take another pill instead of curing what's causing those headaches. Uh,
Is it, Nuno, sorry to jump in there. Is it fair to say as well that when you approach specialists, they tend to recommend, funnily enough, what their specialism is, and we don't have this overview that in the
Absolutely
way that
correct.
you're providing, right? So yeah, you ask the
Absolutely correct.
window guy what should you do, and he will say windows, and then you
Yes,
ask them, yeah, right,
absolutely.
yes,
So we'll say windows, and in the meantime, around the window, it's a huge thermal bridge into your
yeah,
house.
yeah,
But he doesn't resolve that because he's not a
yeah,
masonry person or something like that.
yes,
So a lot of the times the client does not get served well because of this.
mm,
And this requires, if you want to solve the problem in your house, you need to have this holistic view on all the issues that can be wrong in your house. Sometimes it's not simple, sometimes it is. Sometimes it's you need to do three things, and sometimes you need to do one. But they definitely happen. And I can give you an example. It's as simple as putting gutters in your roof. In a lot of cases, the roofs in Portugal have no gutters. And when
why
it
is
rains
that?
like it,
What yeah, why is that? Because that comes as a surprise to people, doesn't it?
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Again, it's like if you look at the compendiums or the standards of construction until the 50s in Portugal, they all have gutters in there. And then all of a
Oh,
sudden, you lose that element, either because in your budget, if you take bits and pieces, you're going to have a cheaper house built, or because someone, enlightened, of course, decided that, nah, this is not needed here. The water goes on the ground where it's going to go.
yes,
The problem is that when the water comes on the ground, it will be sipped in into the foundations
yeah,
instead of being directed away from the house by a gutter. That's why they exist. They're not just to look pretty or whatever. They have a
or
function there.
harvest water, yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Correct. And I could tell you many more examples of things like this. Whereas until the 50s, so until people went away from Portugal and brought these new ideas that were only half-cooked ideas of, is obviously the standards of building in Portugal are quite interesting. The buildings had ventilation. The buildings had, like I said, gutters. The buildings had the different floors were properly insulated and ventilated. And then at some point in time, we started losing this. And
Mm,
now you can only find this on maybe an upper market construction.
yeah.
Or uh, another typical problem that you find in your house is mold or excess humidity in the house. And you can smell it, and sometimes you can see it on a corner of a room. It's there. It's not just because it's annoying and because your clothes feel damp and the whole thing is damp. It's bad for your health. Um, the mold will cause you to cough, causes you headaches, skin rashes, and all kinds of other problems that you may not associate in a first instance with the mold. So what do? You get a bit of bleach and you start scrubbing away that mold. As you do that, you release the spores of the mold, which is basically a fungi, back into your environment. It's actually worse when you try to clean it than just leave it in there, because you're releasing those spores into the environment. So you're cleaning it with your bleach, and it stays clean for, I don't know, a couple of months,
Mm,
um, and then it comes up again. So this is again because you're trying to cure that headache, but the cause of the headache is underlying there. So you continue to do the same thing, but what's causing the mold, it's still there. And that can be why maybe you're drying your clothes indoors, and
mm,
maybe you don't open your windows twice a day to aerate what humidity is in your house. Maybe you cook in the house and you don't open windows, or you know so this there is there is a lot of causes for this to happen, and we're always thinking that no, I'll just clean that and it's okay. No, it's not, because even if you don't see it, it's there. It remains to be there, and it continues to be bad for your health, and you know that because it's not nice. It doesn't feel nice in the house.
it does come as a surprise to a lot of people, doesn't it? I mean, we've got George here saying tonight, I'll have to take my entire wardrobe out with me to protect it from humidity. And
Mhm.
that, again, like you say, it's the rearranging the furniture on the Titanic, isn't it? If you're not dealing with the problem that's causing it,
Correct.
you're going to continue to have those problems. I felt quite proud of myself because I switched from bleach to vinegar.
Hmm.
But The same problem. I'm guessing. I'm presuming
Yep,
that's not causal, is it? It's just dealing with the symptom in maybe a slightly better way than the bleach, but you've got to go to the source of the problem.
correct, correct.
Yeah.
I think all of you remember when asbestos became a problem, when
Yes.
asbestos was identified as a carcinogenic product. So if you leave it alone in your roof or wherever, it's okay. When you start
Yeah.
playing with it and
Yes.
and manipulating it, that's where when the problems arise.
Okay.
It's a bit like the mold. Obviously, we don't want to leave the mold there. We want to find the root of the problem and treat that root of the problem rather than just, oh, I'll just put this here and I'll just put
Wipe the
there.
front end of it off. Yes.
It
Yeah.
may be the case also that you put a dehumidifier in your house working 24/7 to remediate the problem. Yes, it will give you a better environment because it's going to dry up the house and therefore lower the possibility of mold to continue growing.
Hmm.
However, it's just another aspirin that you're taking instead of going to the doctor
Yes.
and in curing the problem that is behind that humidity. So, but this is a normal thing even for Portuguese people already living here. Oh, I have
Yeah.
a humidity problem, and you just accommodate yourself with it because you think, oh, it's okay. And then the summer comes, and then no one talks about that again until it starts raining again.
I do
So,
recognize that pattern. It's like, it's almost, I've described it as like a hibernation previously. So, it's like we don't talk about it. And then just when we can't stand it anymore, the spring comes and the summer comes and it's just forgotten about, isn't it? It's
mhm,
until
mhm.
it,
Yeah,
until it
that's it.
comes around
That's
again
it.
10 months later or whatever. Yeah. Yeah.
So, so the message here is like your house needs to be comfortable for you. It's your house. It's the place where you spend most of the time. It's where you have your things. I mean, maybe you're a book collector, maybe you have clothing.
Yes.
Nothing that should be damaged, especially because you're not outside. So why is this happening inside your house?
Yes.
And in my line of work, what I do is that I go from top to bottom of the house. So you have to actually go in the roof and you have to look into the foundations because the problem may lie in anyone and in any of these places or in several of them. Um, so I do understand how people can feel frustrated about this. I myself, with my family, we bought a farm a few years ago, and that farm had buildings that are the house where I am right now. It's from 18 something. It didn't even have a ground. It was just dirt
Mm.
where the floor is now. So it doesn't matter. I can tell you now that this is one of the most comfortable houses that I've been in. And it's not because it's mine. It's because you're applying these principles to, in this case, yes, part of the construction is new, like the roof, and part of the construction is existing. So you try to find the solutions for the house in a way that it will serve you. So the bounds of the house were excellent, traditional building, 1 meter thick walls. You obviously you cannot rely on that alone because it's insulated on the outside, it's insulated on the inside, it's the roof is ventilated. So I can tell you in the summer it gets really hot in this part of the country, and 35 degrees outside, consistent 22, 24 inside, no air conditioning. So it's possible to do all this. It doesn't necessarily need to be always an expensive exercise. Depends on what you have there and what needs to be put in that building. But it's just the approach.
You're right.
Don't try to fix only one thing because then you'll have another problem.
Yes.
Um, Obviously, when I help people, when I inspect their homes and I give a report about this, I create a series of priorities that then people according to either their because there's another thing here, which is your comfort ambition or your comfort expectation.
Hmm.
Everyone has a different expectation of what this comfort is. And you want to walk around in your shorts and t-shirt home 24 hours a day, or you just want your house to have a nice but cool temperature. You don't mind too much. um, it's all different from people to from person to
Right.
person. Yeah.
Yes. And the Portuguese expectation is possibly to wear a lot of clothing inside, right?
Portuguese, yeah, of course,
Yes, yeah.
of course.
We've
But
seen those
sometimes,
memes. We've seen
sometimes the
those memes,
solution
haven't
can
we?
be actually a simple solution,
Very
that,
pragmatic Portuguese approach there.
yes,
Yeah.
of course. But the Portuguese already bring that culturally with them from their parents and maybe from their grandparents. My
Yes.
grandparents' house, for instance, was in close to Guarda, and it was,
Wow.
I mean,
Okay.
I loved going there, but
Yes.
to sleep in those rooms at night, we had like, I'm telling you, it was difficult to move under the pile of blankets that we
Oh,
have
yes.
to use to be warm. Also because there was no duvets or dunas
No,
in
just
Portugal at
blankets,
the
right?
time.
Happy memories for people, I think, for some people here, and scraping ice off the inside, not just the outside, right? Well, that's brilliant. So you've given us the kind of some of the cultural background and context,
Mhm.
and it is very interesting to know also, there's a number of axes here, aren't there? There's the historical, there's the microclimates of various parts of the country, and there's also people's particular tastes about, how warm they would like to be or wandering about semi-naked in the house, and the home can be adjusted according to those tastes and the geography and the culture that we've inherited or moved into. So what you do is a survey, basically, is it is a consultancy service to go
Mhm.
and look at this from top to bottom. And the key word you've used is a holistic service, not just a symptomatic addressing of the problem.
Correct. So it is indeed holistic. It's the way I see even all the work I've always done. It's to be seen in a holistic manner. If you don't take into considerations all different aspects of a building, in which in the center is the people that are going to live in there. This is very important because it tells that each situation is a situation. Every
Yeah,
house
right.
is different, but
Mhm.
also every occupant of that house is different. So you need to take all this into consideration. And even when you do an objective analysis of a building, in the end, it's about that client telling you, okay, for you, this is a priority from a point of view of a construction point of view. This is the most important points. We would like to take it and like this first, and then maybe something else. So my service is doing these inspections, can be pre-purchase, can be post-purchase, can be pre-construction, or if you just need, a bit of information about your building.
This
Then
this is
there's a
such a good
second part.
service. Yeah,
Yeah,
sorry, no, go ahead.
the second part of it, it depends. I'm not a builder, but
Yeah.
I can put you in contact with a builder or a specific contractor. Talk about HVAC, heating, cooling. Talk
Mhm.
about a specific. I can also do that if you so request it.
I think that's a really helpful service because if you're able to find out if the contractors that people are finding know what they're talking about in a way that they couldn't possibly find out for themselves, that would be a very useful service indeed. So this is a wonderful thing to have now in the Expats Portugal business directory, to have you here and to be able to get involved at different parts of the process as you've outlined there. I do want to ask you about, in a way, it's fascinating what you're saying about building culture and how slowly the building industry has evolved, which really, as you say, is not very much at all over very long period of time, and
Mhm.
you can't give a universal solution. I just wanted to ask you that a question about that before we get into the points and questions that are coming up, if we can go to those as well. But concrete does seem like a pretty awful material to be using in this time in history. What alternatives are there? What would you, if you could influence and help the building industry evolve in Portugal, what sort of suggestions would you be making to the industry and the government along those lines?
That answer is actually quite easy because it's a trend that is growing quite rapidly, and
Right.
you may be surprised. It is wood.
Is it? Right. Okay.
It is maybe not the wood in the sense that you understand a log cabin or
Yes.
or something a bit more traditional. No,
Yeah.
it's also re-engineered wood.
Okay.
It's a glulam. It's which means that there is so the roof that I'm sitting underneath. This is solid wood, but it's not a solid tree cut into these shapes. All the beams, are re-engineered.
Are
They
they?
come from Austria as glued with the wood fibers in different directions. So the bugs will not get into here. This is not going to move with heat or cold. And but the look, you couldn't tell because it's actually
I
solid wood.
couldn't. I would. I'm surprised. We've got knots. We've got decorative knots in
Correct.
there as well.
They're not decorative, they're wood. It's
Are
actually
they?
wood.
Okay. So
There's
right.
nothing here. It's just that
Right.
these different layers of wood
Yeah.
glued with the fibers in different
Okay. Okay.
directions
I've got you. Right. Okay.
and
So
then
like a
clean.
laminate.
But
Yeah.
even if you're close to it, it's still wood. It's just not that log that you're going to cut from a tree, you're going to build with it. So in terms of wood and modern construction, this is a big trend. And I'm
Yes.
talking all the way to high-rise buildings.
Right.
So
Okay.
far, you have already in the UK, I think the tallest one is 30 stories. And I think in Sweden, it's almost to 40-story high building,
Is
apartment
it?
building. Yeah,
And this is such a great advert behind you, Nunu, because clearly you haven't got your bottle of bleach or vinegar out. That
no,
wood
not at all.
is the material you're describing, and it's incredible condition. And when you say without air conditioning, this is thoroughly well specified to
Yep,
meet the needs of the locality and your
correct.
own personal specification. So that's a fantastic advert behind you. Um,
Mhm,
may I go to some of the points and questions raised by our audience tonight?
absolutely.
Is that okay? Okay. So George is saying hi from a humid apartment. Yeah, good for you, George. We've got Ed and Sharon in from snow-covered Ontario. Fortunately, unless you're building up in the Serra da Estrela mountain range, you probably don't have snow as a major consideration in Portugal. That's not
No,
a big deal, is it, snow?
no.
Okay, Susie's in Tamar, Debbie in Coimbra. Great to see you. There will be in Coimbra, of course, 12th of April. Benoit, it's chilly and raining here tonight for Denise in South Africa. Benoit from Carvalhal in Bombarral. Great choice, Christine. Our second week since arriving. Excellent. It's a lovely part of the world. Benoit from Lisbon, from Thea. Good evening to you, Thea. Hello from the Pacific Northwest. Lots of rain here from N. Carson there. Lovely to see you here. I will, yes, and we mentioned before about taking the clothes out of the wardrobe. What's so great about the arrival of your service into our sort of ecosystem here now, Nunu, is before people had to find out the hard way because they weren't expecting things to like leather shoes to be
Mm,
grey when they brought them out several months later, or clothes to be lost entirely, woolens, or books, a precious book collection. They
mhm.
would learn the hard way. So people can get ahead of this now with you. And I think it's all part of the evolution of the service that's being offered. So it's a fantastic thing for the new people coming to Portugal. Hello from San Francisco, from Laura, Scottsdale, Arizona. Cold, windy, and rainy there. Peda in Wales, who I think can resonate with a few of things you were saying about Guarda, quite similar conditions. Guarda, the place to go there. And thanks to Astrid, loving the new email notification of the meeting. So that's a great change as well. That's being appreciated there. Suburb of Lisboa from Tamre there. I've got mold here, says Denise. So similar conditions there in South Africa. Aussie's in tonight as well. Hi, Steve. Good to see you. And Mel as well. When you buy a house in Canada, say Ed and Sharon, a home inspection is usually a must. Is it safe to assume there are home inspectors in Portugal? There are, of course. It's a specialist thing, but only you don't have to have it, do you, Nunu? That's a big surprise for people
No,
sometimes.
so there's a bit of a confusion, which probably is interesting to also explain. When you buy a house in Portugal, or even when you rent a house, I think you need to have an energy certificate.
Hmm.
Where you tell you that your house is classified on a A, B, and C, and D, and
Yep.
whatever else letter on this. This is not a home inspection. This is basically a checklist that a expert does. It does not really address the issues that your house may have. It's,
Yep.
for instance, if you have an air conditioning unit in the house, it clicks, so it checks a little bit of a box, and it gives you, I don't know, many points. If you have shutters on your windows, it'll give you another point. If your windows are double pane, it'll give you another one, and so on and so forth. Those are not really home inspections. They
No.
are mandatory in the US, they are mandatory in Australia, in the UK, but not in Portugal. In fact, there's very few people doing this service, and even some people that are doing the service, well, let's leave it at that.
You're not entirely
Um,
sure. Okay. Well, no, well, I think we get the gist of that.
yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, suffice to say, it's a dangerous assumption to make, isn't it? That any kind of inspection will be anything like
Mhm.
you're used to. And when a bank asks for an inspection, it's often, or a report, it's just for valuation. It's nothing to do with
Yep,
construction,
yep.
is it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
nothing. Even if you are given an A on a
Yeah.
report, on an energy report, it
Yes.
doesn't mean that you're not going to have mold in your house, or
Yeah.
that you like,
It's
stress-free
like
about
just an
what you do.
opinion, isn't it? It's almost an opinion. It's interesting.
Yes, correct,
Yeah.
correct.
Okay. All right. And Mills and Gale, interesting here. The Millers. We used a home inspector, not normal as we've just outlined there, and our seller also balked about it. If your seller is reluctant, that's not a good reason to not have your inspection, is it? Maybe a
No,
reason to definitely have an inspection.
definitely. That would be a big red flag
Big
there.
red flag right there. But I mean, some sellers will be offended though, won't they? Because it's not the norm in Portugal.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
of course.
Okay.
They'll
All
be
right.
offended because you are the client. So if you have an home inspection done,
Yes.
most likely than not, you'll have a card to negotiate the price of that
Yes.
real estate.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's not desirable if you're the
Not
seller,
great for the seller. Okay,
but
fair enough.
that's his problem, not
Yeah, that's
your.
absolutely yes, yes. The art of the deal, one might say. This is why I did not buy a house, but we'll be building one. Say
Mhm,
Mark and Jane using modern techniques. As
mhm.
an engineering construction, I know how bad the homes are here. That's quite a summary judgment there, but I think
Yep.
you're agreeing to some extent there,
Mhm, mhm.
Nuno, as well.
No, no,
We
no. I'm the first. I'm Portuguese, and I'm the first person to say that
yes.
construction is very, very lousy.
Okay. All right. Fair enough.
Just to put
Yeah.
it clear.
If we're making a YouTube short, that's the one tonight. Okay. We have some mildew problems, even with an A energy rating, as you said. Just because you've got
Mhm.
an A doesn't mean it's not going to
No,
happen.
no.
So that energy rating does not guarantee one won't have issues with the house. Very interesting. Working to get a VCM system installed now. So what is a VCM system there? Can we get a decoding from Mills and Gale on that one? It's probably something to do with ventilation, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
Possibly a US abbreviation there. Which building ways and materials would solve the problems? I think we've addressed that to some extent there, George. Yeah, and like going to a surgeon, he'll probably recommend surgery. Yes, the specialist will definitely recommend their specialism, generally
Mhm.
speaking, won't they? Our home inspectors, this is Jen. Thanks, Jen, for this. Are home inspectors able to find homes that have a tendency to get mold accumulation? I would assume that sellers will try and clean the mold before viewing it. And the smell of paint is also a red flag, isn't
Mhm.
it? Do
Mhm.
you are you looking specifically for mold? Presumably, from what you said, Nuna, you're looking for the conditions that would create it. So you're not doing a mold inspection specifically, are you?
No, a mold inspection is something that you perform in the course of a visit.
Yeah. Okay.
It's
All
not
right.
specific for that, but it's one of the things that you can look for.
Okay. All right. What company? Okay. So there's some talk about a VMC there. Can we have an update on that, please, Mills and Gale? The problem is finding someone local to you. Good people are very busy. Well, Nunu said he can help with that as well, finding contractors on that. Gutters and downpipes are also yet another great way to harvest water. Yeah. As
Mhm.
well as stopping the ground becoming soggy, wet, damp, and causing a problem to the house. You can, and it's a good idea. Obviously, not at the moment. We don't need any more water to save, but in droughtful times, definitely. We're looking for a system that includes heat recovery. Have only one proposal for a VMI system,
Mhm.
but still not clear to me how this is different from a VMC. So we need someone to differentiate their VMC and VMI from an
Yep.
American perspective, if you will. Are traditional stone-built houses better?
I can explain that if you want.
Go on, Mark, please.
So, looks like a VMC system is what we call an MEV in the UK, which is a mechanical extract ventilation. So it's like a single extract fan
Yep.
that will have ducts going to all the wet rooms in the house, and it'll constantly extract. They're
Okay.
usually used in conjunction with something like trickle vents on your windows to allow minimum level of ventilation in.
Yep.
Mhm.
The other system, what we call it in the UK, is an MVHR, mechanical vent heat recovery, which has two fans
Yep.
and it has
HRV.
a heat exchanger inside. And what it does is it draws the warm, moist air out of the house. It passes that energy and that air through a heat exchanger. Doesn't mix it, but it passes it to the fresh air that's coming in. And you would extract from the dirty areas of the house, so the wet rooms, the bathroom, the kitchen, the utility, and you would supply the air into the cleaner areas of the house, like the bedrooms, the living room,
Yeah.
etc.
Correct.
Without
And
contamination. Without
yeah, without
contamination.
contamination. MVHRs, my thing for this, MVHRs would do an awful lot for the significant majority of properties and the things that people are talking about here. I know there's lots of things, Nuno, that you can do, but an MVHR system to ventilate these houses and help control some of
Absolutely.
the temperature and
What
humidity.
you call MVHR, it's what I call HRV, which
Yeah,
is
heat recovery vent. Yeah.
Well, it sounds like you two might need to make contact with each other, and maybe Mark, we need to get you in the business director as well. Thanks for that. Appreciate it. Cheers, Mark. Thank you very much. Feel free to come back. I think you've muted back up again. Really appreciate that. Thank you so much. So that's that sorted out there. That's a good question from Denise. Are traditional stone-built houses better in terms of ventilation, or is that not the point, Nuno?
That's not the point.
Yeah.
That's not the point. There can be plasterboards and be great, and there can be stone and be great ventilated houses.
Yeah.
You know, the air circulation doesn't go through the walls, goes through ventilation points that need to be created. They go through, I think Mark referred that trickle ventilation on the windows. So it's not so much about the material of the house. It's more about the solutions that are applied to that specific building.
Yes, yeah. I think Denise has got her heart set on a granite building by the sound of it. And you made a very good point about the buying process is largely emotional, isn't it? So people will buy the house they want and then think, okay, well, I'll deal with all that stuff afterwards. Are you suggesting that it's worth giving yourself a bit of a shake sometimes and not getting too emotionally attached if the house is an absolute pain, a lemon, so to speak?
Yeah, we're talking about extremes. I think, and I speak against myself, I think you need to buy a house that you are emotionally attached to it, especially if you have a medium to long plan with that building. There might be the case that the building is really, you know, really bad.
What's the Portuguese word for that? We say a lemon in the UK. What would you say in Portuguese?
I don't think we have a specific word.
Okay.
We may have very many words for that.
Yes, all right. All right. So, but be careful. A balance between emotion and practicality then when coming to the home. All right. Excellent. Good question here from George. To find a good house, does one have to buy one from the 50s or before? Was there a good time ever, a golden age of construction?
It was a good time, and also picking up on the granite house before.
Yeah.
I mean, every house can be remediated. Yeah.
Yes.
Any house, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It's just to what degree you
Yes.
need to invest on that renewal, so to speak.
Yeah. All right. Very good. So then how does one find people to solve the problems that you find? How I mean, presumably you would work remotely and augment and facilitate relationships with decent contractors.
I'm not going to say that I can serve or know anyone in any point of the country, but I have contacts from my side. I don't like to push those contacts because the client may decide that they go and they find their own contractors.
Yeah.
But in some cases, I may have in the area people that I can recommend or people that come from somewhere else to do the work.
Yes. All right. Would you be prepared to interview contractors on behalf of clients here?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, there you go. And what? So basically, in terms of inspections, you cover all of Portugal. Azores and Madeira, yes. Azores and Madeira, you'd want extra expenses, I think.
Yeah, of course.
And I'm coming with you if we're doing that, right? Okay. Very valuable information. Thank you from iPad there. Hemp bricks. What do you think of the new wonder material, by some people's estimation, of hemp?
Hemp is great. It's a very good material. It's actually being developed in Portugal, and they cannot keep up with the demand. I think it's somewhere around Beja that the industrial unit exists. But yeah, they can't keep up with the demand. It's a great material, but bear in mind there is a lot of great materials. Materials alone will not solve the problem of your molds or whatever else. It's a conjunction of things that need to happen. But of course, if you especially if you are into sustainability, if you want to use good materials, concrete is not the best, environmentally wise. But Hemp, yeah, very good, very good.
Very good. Okay, I'm going to probably keep the rest of these questions down to the next sort of 5 or 10 minutes, and then we will have a private session with you after that, after we finish the recording. So thank you, Nuno. And yes, agree. Very valuable information. Thank you from iPad there on Zoom. Is there any connection with the energy rating of the building? I think you've covered that well already tonight, Nuno. What about fire hazards with wood? That's why people don't. That's why people have a sort of immediate reaction to wood construction. Is it because of the fire problem? What do you say about that?
Yeah, we could do a webinar just about that, because
Oh,
that's one
really?
of
Right.
the most recurrent questions people ask.
Yes.
So you may think that because the house is made of concrete, that there is no fire hazards. There are. What happens with the wood, and especially the re-engineered wood? A lot of tests have been made about the fire hazards on the wood. But to explain this in a summarized way,
Yeah.
the wood burns, obviously, but the wood burns to a certain depth, in
Yes.
which that charred surface will act as a fireproof, if that makes sense to you.
Yes, it does. Absolutely. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's and also the wood is predictable. You know that when exposed to a flame or live flame, it
Yeah.
will evolve in a certain pattern, right?
Yes.
Until it's all consumed by fire, it will develop on a certain pattern that you can predict. Sometimes, or many times, what happens with concrete buildings, and there is a lot of that, is that the steel underneath the concrete hits to an extent that it collapses without any kind of warning.
Yeah. Right.
There's
That's interesting.
different ways to do this.
So these state-of-the-art timber products can create their own fire retardant
Yeah.
effectively. So there you go.
Plus,
And
let's not forget that in a concrete building or in a wood building,
yes.
there is fire protection needed to that surface. Okay?
Yes. Yeah. But household goods are combustible, aren't they? So how we live, and our homes are filled with these things that can combust. Okay, so I think with the questions about tactics and renters, we'll save that for after we've paused the recording here, and we'll basically have a bit of a support group about that. Old stone houses, a choice to insulate inside or outside. One is aesthetic, the other is a choice between a massive heat mass inside preserving temperatures by insulating outside versus insulating inside to block that heat mass. Could you say something about that? It's an interesting question, isn't it? Because I do see this and some really good work in Portugal of exterior insulation. Which do you favor, or does it depend on the situation?
So, well, I favor both, actually.
Okay.
I favor both. If you're talking about, if you're not talking about aesthetics, then definitely from the outside.
Yes.
Because it's like you wearing a jacket. Why are you gonna
Yes.
let that surface either become hot or cold if you can stop that temperature from happening in the first place? So,
Yes.
for instance, one of the traditional ways of building in Portugal is a double wall. And people think, oh yeah, double wall, it's great because there's a gap in between. Yeah, so you build two walls, put insulation inside, usually expanded polystyrene, which will disappear in 2 or 3 years afterwards. And you allowing the first wall to heat up, to then stop that temperature in the middle. That doesn't make much sense. So going back to the stone house, if the stone house is worth showing, because not all stone houses are worth showing the work, because it's a mix and match of different techniques. The house I'm sitting in is one of those.
Yes.
I've used a solution for the outside, which is an insulation done for historic buildings, specifically done for those buildings. Conforms to the irregular wall, so it's not a board. And I have done plasterboard on the inside. So leaving the big thermal mass exposed will then provoke other kinds of problems, because in terms of thermodynamics, the heat will go to where it's cool and vice versa, and then the wet will go where it's dry, and you are pulling all this stuff together. So a big thermal mass building in the summer, for instance, could charge up with heat, which will then be discharged into the interior of the house at night when it's cooler.
Yes.
So it doesn't work like that. traditionally, maybe. In today's day and age, we like to use solutions to cover for that.
Okay, yeah, we've got more technology available to do that.
Mhm.
Great. Okay, there are some big fans of the re-engineered wood here. Is it readily available? Asked Peda.
Yeah,
And how does it compare price-wise to real timber?
it's readily available now. There's actually just 6 months ago a new
Right.
manufacturing unit started in, I think it's north of Aveiro, like
Oh, that's good.
state-of-the-art
Yeah.
factory. How does it compare? It depends. Are you talking just about price or
I think so.
performance?
I think there's a price comparison. Presumably, it's more durable as well because of the construction.
Yes, of course it is.
Yeah,
Of course
yeah.
it is.
So you get that
In terms
value.
of performance, is not even comparable.
Okay.
To work with, not comparable. And in terms of price, from what I know, what I've heard, it might be slightly more expensive, but I'm talking about slightly
Yes,
because
because the costs are, with timber, you've got lots of costs of cutting and
Mhm,
distribution, haven't you? If you're
correct.
creating it in, if you've got the products inside a factory, you've got a different set of costs there. So
Mhm,
perhaps comparable in many ways. And Denise says, I have the most beautiful re-engineered white oak wooden floor, magnificent. So aesthetically, they are wonderful, and the
mhm.
performance is there, as Nuno is saying. Excellent stuff. I think we'll pause the recording there just to say thank you very much, Nuno. Very interesting. Loving the history, the history lesson, the context is very important as well. To note that it's a holistic matter and it depends on people's individual requirements. So to reach out to you, they should go to nunuf of energon.pt, which is the email address that we can see on the screen there. Last word to you. Is there anything else that we've missed or you'd like to add?
From me, it's I think everything has been explained.
Right.
If you need my services, reach out and we can talk.
Right. So the home of your presentation has been built and topped out, and now we drink some champagne together. Excellent. Okay, fantastic. We'll pause the recording there and stick around, everybody, for a bit of a personal Q&A with Nuno this evening. Thanks again.